I very rarely acquire a game on day one. I have forever preached about being a patient gamer, waiting until all the hype dies down to purchase a banger straight to my door, and make the decision for myself if I enjoy the game, making sure that I don't waste any unnecessary funds on my gaming exploits. With Palworld, however, I broke my cardinal rule and went out on a limb. For one, it's actually affordable off rip, which is probably part of how popular it has come to be. It's also able to run on my machine, which I have been clear about in the past, it's not the best. These developers did everything to make this game affordable and accessible, including potato gen PCs, and it's a godsend that is definitely helping it succeed. I think it's obvious that I was going to make a video on Palworld. Everyone and their mother has been making content on this game, and I want to throw my hat in the ring. Instead of just attributing it to Pokemon with guns and calling it a day, I want to instead make an argument for it being much more. This game, incredible as it is, has a lot of similarities to many other games, and this has resulted in its fair share of drama. I want to discuss all of this and much more. If you like this type of content and want to keep me from joining the syndicate, Palworld that subscribe button below. Without further ado, let's get into it. Palworld released on January 19th, 2024, just 7 days ago as I am recording this. It has hit over 8 million copies sold on Steam, not including Xbox sales. Rarely does a game succeed this much. Palworld has just become the second game in history to reach over 2 million concurrent players on Steam. Palworld has hit these milestones and records so quickly that it is on everyone's radar as a result. There are already over 100,000 reviews on the game by now, and they are all glowing. It seems like no matter what, this game is meant for success and is planning to only get bigger. I think, in part, the game can owe its massive success to a handful of streamers. The top one being Charlie, aka Big Moist himself. He often spends his time with many different games, bad or good, but Palworld has found its way into his roster of favorite games very quickly. Just like Charlie, I also share a disdain for the modern Pokemon cash grab era, and as a result, this title just hits different. It feels the nostalgia and explores a lot of avenues that Pokemon would never go down. Let's get into that a bit more. Honestly, people call it Pokemon with guns, but I don't see that angle as much. Yes, it can apply in this situation, but only very loosely. There have been numerous Fakeamon games throughout the years, but this doesn't feel like one of those. Palworld feels more like reimagining of Arc done right to me. Arc always looked terrible, so buggy it was unplayable, and Palworld, while it still has its bugs, just does things right, to the point it has obviously been successful. The servers may get stressed a bit, but they're not long before they're back up. The gameplay also doesn't align itself to Pokemon's turn-based battles, which feel really outdated at this point. I love a good turn-based RPG more than anyone, but for a franchise that has been around for over 20 years, you would figure that they innovate a bit more by now. Palworld also doesn't have much of a story. Even though Pokemon always had a dogshit story, it always had one, Palworld is just open-ended. There is a little bit story here and there, with NPCs, journal entries, but it's still very much open-ended more than anything. There may be more to it obviously down the line, but as of right now, all I can see is syndicate bad guys, raid bosses, dungeons, and towers. It's just a lot of open-ended exploration, freedom, and battling, which is something that Pokemon never actually did very well. The map size, for one, is extremely huge and not linear at all. You can go wherever, whenever you want. This freedom is intoxicating. It's enjoyable and such a fresh breath of air. You were comparing it to modern Pokemon games, I would say Pokemon is the lazy ripoff of Palworld. Invisible barriers, incredibly frustrating glitches, empty worlds compared to Palworld, which just seems so alive, everywhere you look. And you can just go anywhere you want, anytime at all. Oh, see something cool over the water? Grab a flying pow and make your way over no problem. If we boil similar games down to their cores, then it's pretty obvious that Palworld isn't like a lot of other games. Pokemon, at its heart, is a game about leveling up Pokemon, taking on gym battles, and fighting the Elite Four. There's always a team of bad guys, and that's about it. Most moves to actually move around are restricted behind different ways of progressing the games, so it's never too fast. Arc, while sharing the most similarities, in my opinion, still feels like a different game than Palworld. While Palworld is a survival game with pals like dinosaurs, they have a lot more to do than the dinosaurs in Arc. It also feels like with the pals automating tasks, it gives a Factorio vibe. I think other people have felt this too, where it's like a full assembly line and endgame can get a little crazy with it. For raid bosses, caves, and dungeons, you can take any RPG game nowadays to draw your references. The base building feels like any other early access game in all honesty, and in the future they plan to implement cross-server trading and PvP. It feels like Palworld is what a lot of games could be and are trying to perfect a whole lot of qualities that made a lot of games popular. It's like they went through a grocery store, saw something on the shelf, said I like that, and threw it in the cart. Then they did that a dozen more times. If you condense all of these elements into one game, that's what you get. Palworld in all its glory. Being an early access game, it has its obvious fair share of bugs, but unlike a Pokemon game, it doesn't act like there isn't any. How many times have modern Pokemon games released empty, dead worlds full of broken content? If you're saying this is Pokemon with guns, you're giving Pokemon way too much credit at this point. This is something that a near indie studio has dedicated 3 years to and given the utmost care and hard work for. I also have to say I haven't even encountered that many bugs. I encountered one visual bug where a PAL sphere was attached to my hand the entire first day, but that was hilarious. The only other bug I really encountered, and I did have to relog for, was an audio Stadia-related one where the combat music would not stop playing no matter what. I haven't had this game crash or struggle on me at all yet. I think it has to say something that a game of this level can run just fine and work this well, even in early access. Palworld's developers are truly putting in the hard work to make sure their game feels polished. It's not perfect, it's early access of course, but it feels so good that it's well deserved its success so far. I'd also like to take a moment to just say this is the best game I've ever seen with loading times and fast traveling. It literally takes less than a few seconds to get in between locations, and that's just downright impressive. Unsurprising to none, this game has kind of taken the world by storm. Plenty of people are just adoring over this game, including Big Moist and many other public faces. Hell, Charlie uploaded 3 to 4 videos of it already. It's really giving off dark and darker vibes with how controversial yet how popular this game is, and I couldn't be happier. I'm not a dick rider, but I do love this game. I love it because it reminds me a lot of different games altogether. It gives me blasts of nostalgia, but it twists things in just the right way to make it so much more fun than its competitors. Like the catching humans, everyone knows about this by now. It doesn't make you super overpowered, and it doesn't include super big benefits, but it's a fun attention to detail. The developers though, they thought why not, and it rewards players for doing so. I've even seen a bug where people can catch a boss, and I really feel like they may not even bother patching it with how cool these devs are. It feels like they're more than just developers, they're players that understand what players want. I have to say, from my perspective, it gets 10 out of 10 pals just for everything it's done so well and pulled off. Another thing I have to mention that I absolutely love is that this game does not do Breath of the Wild, Assassin's Creed, whatever game you want to mention, towers. That's right, no more hopping off a structure to get map details, you just get it all by naturally exploring, and I love this detail. This is how games were meant to be before people got lazy with those stupid watchtowers. Please never change this. Now, unfortunately, comes the biggest part of this video. The hate, the conspiracies, and the controversies, the drama, the meat of the pie, so to speak. With a game this explosive, you know it had to piss someone on Twitter off just to start a war. I'm not going to cover everything completely in depth, but I will just give a slight rundown of the nibbly bits thus far. Really, at the core, there are 2 arguments. 1, it plagiarized Pokemon, and 2, it uses AI. For 1, I don't really think you can be mad about the designs of some of these pals. While they are very similar, there's not a lot of ways to expand on what's already been done before. There's only so many ways to draw a circle, and therefore only so many ways to draw a snake. This is going to be a repeat offender. No one's going to be completely happy, but it's absolutely true. Let's look at the facts with Palworld's development. It has been an ongoing project for 3 years, and it's still in early access. Nintendo has also never been a stranger to sue or take down projects because they're infringing on their franchise. Granted, those are more outright cases where they're especially projects made with Mons in mind, but Fakemon games for the most part have been pretty clear. If we continue to view it as such, we might be in the clear here as well. There was also a blatantly fake argument started on Twitter where he claimed that models were ripped, but that was found out to be false because he scaled them in a manner that portrayed it was ripped. However, that doesn't mean they're entirely safe. If I got a model of Gyarados and scale it 50 times up, I can't just say that's a different model. You really have to weave in and out of the bullshit that's been spewing recently, and you'll eventually just have to wait for the dust to settle to make any big conjecture here. We can say they're similar all we want, but we'll never know until more information comes out. For the part involving AI, it's only because AI has become the next big taboo. I'm still optimistic about AI's involvement in the digital world, only because AI can help even the weakest novice get a foothold into something they struggle with. For example, what if the game developers used AI to start with some simple coding scripts or helped with menial tasks like textures or more? While this topic can differ greatly depending on who you ask, I think that as long as the majority isn't some AI overhaul, then I think we're fine. It's also important to note that even if they did use AI for some parts in the process, it's not like AI can create this entire project at this scale. There was for sure a definite human touch on this project, and I think that's why it stands out so well. The only reason AI is being brought up in the first place is because there was actually AI involvement in one of the creators' last projects, AI Art Imposter, and even that is a completely different way AI is used, and the game actually seems like a really fun and interesting twist on games like Pictionary. The game has apparently done so much harm to people that the developers are receiving death threats, which I just find ridiculous. Those same people pissed off at Palworld are probably the same people who spend $60 a year for a broken Pokemon game and still think they're the cream of the crop even though it's all crap. I am extremely optimistic and hopeful about the future of Palworld. I have no doubt that Palworld will have a relentless series of hurdles to overcome now. There's no doubt in my mind that Nintendo will pursue them as much as they possibly can. For one, there is no fair use law in Japan, and they're both Japan-based, so it won't even be an international-based lawsuit. It'll be in-country and won't be very difficult. For those stating that they've had time to do so and haven't acted yet and think that Palworld is fine, you don't really know Nintendo, or Pokemon for that matter. Nintendo has an ego, and that's the most dangerous thing the most popular, highest-grossing franchise on the planet can have. The Pokemon Company has finally made an official statement regarding Palworld, and while Pokemon Company doesn't specifically mention Palworld by name, it's very clear this statement is in response to the incredible success the game is experiencing. We have received many inquiries regarding another company's game released in 2024 of January. The Pokemon Company wrote, "We have not granted any permissions for the use of Pokemon intellectual property or assets in the game. We intend to investigate and take appropriate measures to address any acts that infringe on intellectual property rights related to the Pokemon. We will continue to cherish and nurture each and every Pokemon in this world and work to bring the world together through Pokemon in the future." In an interview with with Automaton, Pocket Pair CEO Takuro Mizobi shared that the team cleared legal reviewing and there had been no action taken against the company for infringement. We take our games very seriously and we have absolutely no intention of infringing upon the intellectual property of other companies, the CEO said. The Pokemon Company has already started taking action against modders who have replaced Palworld's pals with Pokemon, and Nexus Mods has even said it won't host Pokemon mods for Palworld out of fear from Nintendo's legal team. I think that Nintendo doing this shows just how weak and fragile their ego is. For one, how many games have had Pokemon mods, Minecraft included, and why make a stink about it now? It almost seems like bullying. I'm glad to hear that they haven't encountered any legal trouble thus far, but I'm almost sure it will. Honestly, it feels like it's going to take a dark and darker route through all of this. They're going to have to defend themselves over and over again. They may get taken off of Steam, pushed into releasing independently, but in the end, that's a small price to pay with this level of success and popularity. And hey, that week 1 payday sure will help through the process. In the meantime, for all those defending Pokemon and white knighting them for no reason, just drop it. Trust me, if Pokemon wants to sue, they don't need a line of Twitter warriors behind them to do it. Furthermore, it's not your job to defend a game that you've played for 20 years. It should be their job. And unfortunately, they failed. And with that, I think that's all there is to say about Palworld. There's probably a lot more I haven't even covered, but I think there's still a lot more to come in the future. I really hope Palworld doesn't get defeated by big corporations, and at the very least, is a message to Nintendo to start putting some actual work into their Pokemon game. Thank you everyone so much for listening to me today. If you have anything to say, please drop me a comment down below. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Bye, have a great time.